What's up, guys? Welcome to another Turn 'em Sideways channel video. I've got one that you guys have been waiting for a while. I have a deck tech with Declan. He made top 32 at the SCG CON Vegas Riftbound 10K, playing a very unique Victor list that we got to see on stream. So, Declan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the people a little bit about you before we jump in on this list.
What's up? My name's Declan. I go by Dino Dexter online. I've been playing competitive card games for about 2 years now. Started with Battle Saga, then have been playing Star Wars Unlimited for uh, basically the entire length of the game, and now I have been giving Riftbound a try.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into this. Your deck list has garnered over 7,500 views on Piltover Archive since the tournament, so people have been really excited about it. And let's just start out easy enough. 6/6 rune split. We'll talk about that at the end because there's a lot of cards that'll kind of make that make sense. But let's talk about your battlefield choice. Dreaming Tree, War Camp, Vilemaw's Lair. What's your like game one, game two, kind of game three setup, or I guess game one, and then if you were to win, what you would pick, and if you were to lose, what would you pick? And just let me know why you pick these three.
Sure. So I actually think the battlefields are by far the most important part of this deck, because in the meta for SCG Con, we expected to see a lot of Kaisa, and Kaisa decks. I think this may change with the game, but at least for now, Kaisa decks are almost always opening game one on Dreaming Tree. So really, this deck was just thinking, if my opponent's always opening on Dreaming Tree, what do I do to play around that? So game one, if I'm against the Kaisa, I'll open on Vilema's Lair because their Dreaming Tree is the location I really want to be at.
Yeah.
If I'm not playing into a Kaisa deck, I'll open on Dreaming Tree. Then, usually if win, against Kaisa, I usually win on their Dreaming Tree, and then I usually move to the Vilema's Lair just because like I don't really expect to beat Kaisa on the draw, so use it just as kind of a throwaway. And then game three, again against Kaisa, I'll bring in my own Dreaming Tree, or against other decks, if I open on Dreaming Tree similar, I'll bring in Vilema's Lair when I'm on the draw, Trifarian War Camp when I'm on the play.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, just War Camp being arguably strongest battlefield. I guess Dreaming Tree is very strong for your list as well, but having War Camp when you're also advantaged by being on the plays is definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think as we move forward, I guess like as we're gonna jump into the meat of this deck, because immediately people are saying, the Blue Viktor, the seals, all the craziness of this list. What was the like reason for Viktor, and what was the overarching strategy of this deck before we kind of jump into the individual card choices?
Sure. So really, this deck list started as my Lux list, and just coming up to SCG Con, I realized Viktor does it's the same colors as Lux, and it can basically do the same thing, but it's just strictly better. So this really didn't start out as a Viktor list; it started out as a Lux list, just swapping out the legend. So most of the card choices are just about like playing tempo removal. With the advantage now with the Viktor, as long as I spend my turns wiping their field, I will always win the game just with the 1/1 tokens.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you've got a guy and they have no guys, then you get to go move in and score. So let's go ahead and start with the early drops then, and then we'll kind of move into the idea behind all these seals. I mean, you're running 3 Soaring Scout, 3 Watchful Sentry as your 6/2 drops. I mean, you're playing Viktor, so you don't quite need as many. What are the reasons behind these two? Is it just because they have the death knells and they're also basically just a recruit with a little bonus, or is there any other reason behind that?
Uh, no, that's basically it. Like, my idea was this deck's basically never going to win combat anyway, so the only thing I really need from my turn one plays, compared to just the recruits, is any advantage they can give me later on, and that's exactly what these two one drops
Nice.
do. Though I do regret only running 6 out of my 2 losses. One of them simply was just not hitting turn one plays enough. So I think in my updated list right now, I have added 2 Poros just to make it like
Cool.
not so bricky.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, I guess we'll talk about the Viktor Innovator, and instead of going for the other side of it, I mean, I can see a lot of the spells here. Most people are playing Victor Leader instead, but Innovator and being the 3 might dying to Falling Star, did you still feel like you were able to get a lot of value out of this card?
Yeah, I think I got more value. I think I got more value out of the blue card than I could possibly have gotten out of the yellow. My issue with the yellow version of the Victor champion unit is it uh so like in that case you just proposed there with like the blue Victor only having 3 toughness. The issue is it dies to removal, but if an opponent has a removal spell, then the yellow Victor is not going to get
Yeah,
value either. But the difference is if my opponent's just going to remove them as soon as I play it either way, I can at least with the blue Victor respond to the removal spell with a stupefy or a hidden card and get the extra token, as opposed to yellow Victor just also being removal bait but giving me nothing.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think like as I look through the list and with the extra hidden and just the 3x stupefy, you've got the hidden blades. I think it does make a lot of sense to just kind of try and get a little bit of bonus value out of the Victor. Exactly as you said. I have to ask you, 5 seals. Did did this what is the reason I guess behind so many, and like did you ever feel like your hands was just getting too clogged with seals, or do you just feel like this deck has enough draw that you're able to kind of get around it?
I never felt like I bricked on the seals actually. I think
Wow.
I mean the seals are just free like resource advantage. And remember again, this deck was kind of built to be played into Kaisa, which I did play into like 5 of my rounds, I think. So this deck was built around the idea that I'm getting 2 of the 3 games on Dreaming Tree. So
That's true.
I have the card advantage where it doesn't really matter for me wasting 5 of my draws on seals, but those seals let me get up to 10, 12 mana for like time warps and stuff, despite the fact that I still have to recycle like 2 or 3 resources per turn to play with my removal spells.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. That makes a ton of sense. Let's talk about some of that the big spells that you've got. Because the seals, of course, you have those to pay power costs, and you do have some large power costs in here, right? The full copies of Singularity, 2 copies of Time Warp. You have the Imperial Decree, which I like. I like Imperial Decree a lot as a removal spell for these kind of Victor decks. But yeah, tell me about this suite of big spells that you're playing, because as you said, it started as a Lux deck. So these were your like big spell Lux cards that are now coming over to the Victor list.
Yeah, so I guess first off, Singularity is a broken card. It's Falling Star, but it does twice as much damage. And yeah, it's a guaranteed 2 for 1. So I knew that I definitely wanted to play that as a 3 of. Imperial Decree is really good. It's basically one of the only other ways to to kill multiple big units in one turn. So I had the 2 copies there and the third in the side. It's basically the only way to clear out like set decks that just try and hold a big field or into Aurora decks once they've already
Yeah.
like set up with Aurora for multiple turns. And then the time warps are just really good ways to win the game. Like again, I was just very carefully looking at what a Kaisa deck is trying to do, and I realized a lot of Kaisa decks just win the game from being able to time warp out of nowhere. And I said, I'm playing blue. I could do that as well. And it's especially good with Ekko being able to cheat out that time warp early, or potentially Ekko, even when you have enough resources for time warp, to get even more resources so you can clear the field, conquer, then time warp
Yeah, I was
with like a
actually
removal spell.
going to ask. The next thing I was going to ask you about was Echo, because this is the card that I think there are very few players actually playing Echo. And I know that on this channel, I've talked about Echo being a card that I thought maybe in the future would be really good to open up a lot of combos. But you've already kind of cracked an Origins deck that actually can efficiently use this Echo Time Warp combo. Did you win off of Echo Time Warp a lot during this tournament, or was this just kind of an out that you also had?
So there were definitely multiple games in the tournament that I was able to win with Echo into Time Warp. But even outside of that, I just think Echo is a extremely good card in the game with the blue seals, because like at base, if you have the 2 blue seals out and you're hitting into a 5 cost unit, this is basically just a free removal spell, right? Like you play it, swing, kill something, and get your mana back. So it just kills something
Yeah.
5 might for 0. But also 5 might very important in the game. It trades with Darius, it kills Kaisa. Um it's trades with MF, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. MF is also a 5, yeah.
So it's just really good, uh, especially if you just have 2 in hand. Your opponent has this giant board, but you have the 2 blue seals, and so you accelerate Ekko, kill their thing, untap all of your resources, accelerate enough for Ekko, kill their other thing, untap your resources. Hopefully you have enough for like a singularity, and then you just kill 4 things completely out of nowhere.
Honestly, yeah, I mean that sounds sick. Like this sounds like a really cool idea. I mean, I think in general, accelerate is just such a valuable keyword in this game with how fast the meta has been. So like finding a use for another like slightly cheaper accelerate than Watcher, or even significantly cheaper, I guess it's like full 2 energy cheaper than having to play a Watcher. Watcher is like more efficient on a wide board, but Ekko is like really efficient in how your deck is constructed and being able to just like do an Ekko and then singularity something else, and you have access to this like earlier than Watcher throughout the game. So that was like kind of leads me to the next question of like why no Watchers, but maybe I've answered it myself from here.
Yeah, for Watcher, I think Echo does a similar thing as just an accelerated unit you can play to score points. And other than that, there's just not really room in the deck. Like,
Yeah.
I'm running like the maximum amount of card draw I can without resorting to some like over costed cards like the three like Lecturing Yordle, which I do not like as a card. Um and so I'm running the maximum amount of card draw. I have 3 copies of all of the really like efficient removal spells, and then Echo to do the Time Warp combo. I just don't see room in this deck to be able to put in Watchers.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, the last thing in the deck before we go to the sideboard, I just want you to kind of break down this the spell suite that you've got. We already talked about the big ones, but let's talk about the Consult the Past, Call the Weak, Hidden Blade, Retreat, Stupefy. I know for a lot of people, some of these are pretty obvious for a Victor deck, but at least kind of just explaining for anybody who's maybe newer to the legend why you go for these, and then especially 3 full copies of Retreat in the main, I think is a little bit more interesting.
Sure. So for Console the Pass and Hidden Blade with the seals, they are truly just 0 cost draw 2. Um, there's really no reason not to run them as 3s because if you draw them, you just draw 2 for 0 resources into your other cards. Cold a Week is the most efficient removal spell in this game. You can kill anything from a Kaisa to a Mundo for only 2 mana. Um, the only disadvantage is you have to kill your own thing, but you can sacrifice a token, you can sacrifice one of your death metal units, you can use it to trigger Echo. Probably the best line this deck has against Yi is if you go second with starting with 3 resources, you can Cold a Week while you have an empty board, kill their turn 1 play, then make a token to stop them from conquering first. And then the Stupefy and Retreats are just there for, again, the Dreaming Tree games. Because Stupefy is just a 1 mana draw 2 in the Dream Tree games. Retreat ramps you and gives you a card draw in the Dream Tree games. Plus, Retreat's really good in Victor, specifically because you always have access to a 1 cost creature to retreat with it. Like, even if you don't draw into any of your turn 1 plays, your scouts or sentries, you can always just turn 1, make a token, immediately bounce it back to your hand, and make it just a 2 mana ramp spell essentially.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like because just for people who don't know, that just does effectively just kills your token, but kills your token for a rune. So it's not nothing that it's doing, and especially if you were to like run it into Dreaming Tree and conquer, and then just retreat it and you kill it and draw 1 and ramp a rune, that's also pretty like effective and something that I probably wouldn't have thought of doing that frequently with the deck like this.
That's
But it is funny that it works. Yeah.
especially with Blue Viktor out, those cards, like the Hidden Blade your own unit, Retrieve your own unit, normally you just kill the token, but once you have your Blue Viktor out, you're doing it during their turn, and so you don't care. It's
Yeah.
Hidden Blade your own thing on Dream Tree, draw 3, kill the token, make a token.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is a very efficient play, and you're just getting infinite cards, so that when you're setting up these plays, like, you're talking about these plays of like, oh, you have this removal where it's like Ekko into it dies, into another Ekko, into it dies, into Singularity. And it's like, this is really card like hungry, but when you're playing the Dreaming Tree, you've got these hidden blades onto your guys. Like, you actually do have like just a lot of ways to just draw an insane amount of cards in this deck. So kind of makes sense that you're able to like use these. I'm not going to say inefficient. They are very efficient plays, but they just require a lot of cards to do them. And like you're able to just do that because of this extra card draw, which is really cool. So um, let's go ahead and talk about your sideboard and maybe some of the 39s that you would play, like what would come out, what would come in. So kicking things off, I mean, you've got Salvage, Facebreaker, the extra Imperial Decree, and then the 2 Machine Evangels. So where do these kind of each come in, and what would you usually take out for them?
Sure. So, for this deck, what's basically always going to come out is going to be the 3 retreats because they're really good on Dreaming Tree games and not really good on non-Dreaming Tree games. So it's almost always going to be those 3 out. Into Kaisa, we put in the 2 Machine Evangels and the 3rd Decree. Machine Evangel is just really, really hard for Kaisa to deal with because it trades with their Kaisa 4-drop, and then you make 3 tokens, and even if you like don't have a good trade, you just stick it at a battlefield and basically say, um, like, I'm either gonna get the hold point or you just give me 3 tokens, and that's really strong. The 3rd decree, sometimes you just need a 3rd decree as like a 3rd board wipe-ish card, especially into decks like Aurora and Yi, where you don't really have a way to answer their boards otherwise, because they go over Singularity. The 3 salvages, mostly for Aurora, but right now in the game, they're also extremely good into Yi because Zonia's Hourglass just really
Yeah.
blows you out as a removal deck, but it's a really efficient play to just pay 2, salvage their Zonia's Hourglass, draw a card, then play Singularity.
Yeah,
Um,
it's cool. It basically says kill a unit. This is like 6 damage against Yi. You're just like, I just killed your second Yi that would have showed up. So no, I love it. I love that you're bringing that in against Yi. I think it's a great idea, especially in yellow, right, where salvage is so efficient as a card because it replaces itself.
Also into set, because right now set decks are running like the 3 of Arena Bar, and a lot of set units, especially because they're running the 4-cost set sometimes, don't have a great way to buff their own units outside of not outside of Showstopper. So sometimes just salvaging their arena bar can really disrupt their whole game plan. And then the 2 of Facebreakers goes into Yi, Sed, and Aurora because it's basically the only way you can hold in this deck, right? Like
Yeah.
none of these tokens can win in combat, but sometimes in the matchups you do have to get the hold point, and when they move their Dead Bloom back up, you can Imperial Decree and trade that token with the Dead Bloom. And it doesn't, Facebreaker doesn't require you to recycle, so it's also just kind of a free token with the Blue Viktor.
Yeah, that's true. It's also cool because like you have the seal, so you can also just like hide this if you had to spend all the runes on your turn as well. It's why I've liked Facebreaker and like Leona decks and some other yellow decks as a one of. Just like this is a hey when I need to win with a hold, like this hidden Facebreaker, I can just rune dump and hide it, and it's like a very good spell for that. But it kind of has even bonus for your deck because like yeah, you can hold it for 2 runes if you have the 2 runes up. You can hide it with a seal probably at some point because you just don't need to like worry about having to pay that power cost, and maybe you tapped out to play Singularity plus something on the previous turn. So I think that's a really cool idea to run the face breakers. And honestly, this list just is it feels really well constructed. It feels like it has a really good identity, and a lot of Victor lists I feel like have fallen a little flat. And I think you just had a really solid game plan into Kaisa, and it resulted in a top 32. It was a really good placement at this tournament on a deck that has struggled to convert recently. So honestly, just well done, Declan. And I wanted to give you the floor to be able to shout out anybody you worked with or anything that you want people to be able to find you at, whether you've got a YouTube channel or a Twitter, anything like that.
Cool. Yeah, so you can find me and my team on at Absolute Rice Field on YouTube. We have our team gameplay, some of my past feature matches hosted there. And also you can find me on Reddit r u/Dino Dexter. where I sometimes post deck decks.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much, Declan. I appreciate you coming on the channel and doing this with us. If anybody at home enjoyed this deck tech, let us know what kind of things you'd want to see next. Let us know what players you'd like us to try and get on to tell you about their deck lists. And be sure to hit that sub button and just check us out for even more great content. We'll see you on the next one.